The sun rose slowly over the small southern town, its orange glow stretching across endless fields of dry soil and corn stalks that bent in the wind. Naomi Walker leaned against the fence post outside her farmhouse, the worn wood beneath her hands as familiar as her own skin. At 45, she had worked this land longer than most of her neighbors had been alive. To them, she was nothing more than a quiet black woman, another poor farmer trying to survive. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was the fire buried beneath her silence. The farm had been her parents' dream, and now it was her burden. Her father used to say, "This soil carries the stories of our people, Naomi. It remembers." Every furrow she dug, every seed she planted, she felt his words sink deeper into her bones. But farming was never just about crops. It was about survival, dignity, and refusing to surrender what little was theirs. Naomi walked the rows slowly, her boots crunching the dirt. She had no family left here. Her parents had died years ago. Her siblings moved to distant cities, leaving her to guard the land alone. And though the work was grueling, the solitude didn't scare her. What haunted her was the world beyond her fields, a world that still judged her skin before it judged her soul. Her neighbors didn't know her story. They didn't know that years earlier, Naomi had worn the uniform of a U.S. Army sniper. She had been sharp, deadly, and precise. She could hold her breath steady for hours, waiting for the perfect shot. They didn't know that she had medals tucked away in an old wooden box inside her barn, or that her steady hands had once saved soldiers who owed their lives to her. She had returned home from war, not to glory, but to whispers and dismissive stares. To them, she was just Naomi, a farmer. Nothing more, but the land knew her. The land remembered her sacrifice, her father's sweat, her mother's prayers. That was enough for her, or at least it used to be, because Naomi knew the peace she had carved out here was fragile. Trouble had been crawling closer for months now, carried on the roar of motorcycles and the laughter of men who thrived on fear. The Iron Vultures, they called themselves, a gang that preyed on small farms like hers, demanding money, stealing crops, and burning whatever they couldn't take. Families whispered their names but dared not resist. People paid what they could, or abandoned their land entirely. Naomi had heard their threats. She had seen the smoke from neighboring farms curling into the sky like warnings, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the vultures came for her. That evening, as the cicadas sang their sharp chorus, Naomi walked into the old barn at the edge of her property. The scent of hay and oil filled her lungs. She knelt in the dust, sliding open a trunk that hadn't been touched in years. Inside lay her past, fatigues folded neatly, dog tags glinting faintly in the dim light, and at the very bottom, her rifle. She ran her fingers over the cold steel, her breath hitching in her throat. Her reflection flickered in the barrel. She didn't want this life anymore. She had come home to find peace, not to be dragged back into battles. Yet the world seemed determined to remind her that being a black woman alone in this town meant you were easy prey, a target no one would protect. Naomi closed the trunk slowly, her hands trembling. "I just want to live," she whispered to the silence of the barn. But deep down she knew, peace doesn't survive in a world where hate keeps knocking on your door. And soon, hate would come looking for her. It happened on a Friday night just after sunset. Naomi had finished supper and was closing up the barn when she saw the headlights. Bright beams cut across her fields, bouncing wildly as trucks barreled down the dirt path leading to her home. Engines roared, music blasted, and then came the laughter. Loud, sharp, and cruel. Her stomach tightened. She knew who it was, the Iron Vultures. 3 trucks rolled into her yard, dust rising in heavy clouds. Men jumped out, boots hitting the ground with heavy thuds. Their jackets bore the image of a black bird with its wings spread wide, talons sharp and dripping red paint meant to look like blood. They smelled of gasoline, beer, and arrogance. At the front was Rex Dalton, their leader. Tall, broad, with a cruel grin plastered across his face, he carried himself like he owned every piece of land he stepped on. He walked toward Naomi's porch, clapping slowly, mockingly. Well, if it isn't the Walker farm," Rex drawled. "Pretty little patch of dirt you got here. Shame if something happened to it." Naomi stood on her porch, arms crossed, her face calm. "This is my land. You've got no business here," the men laughed. One of them, skinny and mean-eyed, spat into the dirt. "No business? Lady, we are the business. And you're late on your dues. Naomi didn't flinch. I don't owe you a thing. Rex's grin widened. He stepped closer, his boots heavy on her wooden porch. See, that's where you're wrong. Everyone owes us something. You pay, you keep your little farm. You don't pay. He glanced back at his men. Boys? In seconds, two of them grabbed shovels and metal rods from the truck. They stormed into her field, smashing stalks, tearing apart the rows she had worked tirelessly to maintain. Another doused the edges of her crops with gasoline. The sharp stench filled the air. Naomi's voice rose firm but steady. Stop it, you've made your point, but Rex only laughed. He pulled out a lighter, flicking it open and shut. No, I don't think we have. The flame caught, small but menacing. He tossed it casually into the gasoline-soaked soil. In an instant, fire roared to life, consuming the crops in a wave of orange and black. Naomi's heart clenched as months of sweat and labor went up in smoke. The men cheered. One shouted, "Next time it won't just be your corn we burn." Rex leaned close to Naomi, his voice low, venomous. You'll remember this, Walker. You pay, or you lose everything. Then he turned, strutting back to his truck like he'd already won. Within minutes, the trucks peeled away, leaving behind only smoke, ash, and Naomi's broken fields. She stood frozen, fists clenched, the flames reflecting in her dark, steady eyes. The next morning, Naomi drove into town. She walked into the sheriff's office, smelling faintly of smoke, her clothes still streaked with soot. Sheriff Tomlin sat behind his desk, a large man with a mustache that twitched as he chewed on a toothpick. Naomi told him everything, the trucks, the gang, the fire. Her voice was calm but edged with urgency. Tomlin leaned back, scratching his chin. Sounds like you had some kids messing around. Probably just a prank, her jaw tightened. That wasn't a prank. They burned my fields. They threatened my life. He waved his hand dismissively. You people always make things bigger than they are. If I locked up every kid who set a fire, half the county would be in jail. Naomi's chest burned hotter than the flames that had consumed her corn. These aren't kids. It's Rex Dalton and the Iron Vultures. You know who they are? Tomlin's expression shifted slightly, discomfort flickering in his eyes, but he covered it quickly. Can't go around accusing good old boys without proof. And between us, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. You might want to let this go. Stirring up trouble only makes it worse. Naomi stared at him, her silence sharper than any words she could have spoken. She realized then that the law wasn't going to protect her. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. When she walked back outside, the townsfolk were already whispering. Some gave her pitying looks. Others crossed the street to avoid her, muttering about how she shouldn't pick fights she can't win. Naomi climbed into her old truck, her heart heavy. The system had spoken, her neighbors had spoken. She was alone. That night she stood by the charred remains of her crops, the acrid smell clinging to the air. For the first time in years, she let her shoulders sag under the weight. She had faced enemies overseas, men with weapons and armies at their backs. But here, in her own town, she felt more powerless than she ever had in combat. Yet somewhere inside, a flicker remained. A voice quiet but steady, whispering words her father once told her. This land is ours because we fought for it. Don't let anyone steal it again. Naomi lifted her eyes to the horizon, her jaw set. The fire had taken her crops, the sheriff had taken her dignity, but they hadn't taken her will. Not yet. The farmhouse was quiet, too quiet. Naomi sat at her kitchen table, staring at the blackened field through the window. Ash clung to the soil like a wound that would never heal. Her calloused hands rested on the table, still trembling from the night before. She whispered to herself, what am I even doing? Holding on to land nobody cares about. Fighting a fight I can't win. The walls around her seemed to echo the silence of her parents, gone years ago but never forgotten. She remembered her father, tall and steady, leaning against the porch railing on summer nights, telling her, the land remembers who loves it. You plant respect, it gives back life. You let someone take it, you've lost more than crops, you've lost your roots. But now, looking out at the scorched soil, Naomi wondered if he'd been wrong. Maybe the land couldn't protect her anymore. Maybe it was a weight, not a gift. She rose and walked to the old barn. Dust clung to the rafters, sunlight cutting through cracks in thin beams. In the far corner, beneath a tarp, lay a long metal case. Her fingers brushed the latches, hesitant, almost fearful. With a deep breath, she opened it. The rifle lay inside, cold and familiar. The very weapon she once used overseas as a U.S. Army sniper. Her breath caught in her throat. She remembered the hours she had spent on rooftops in the desert, waiting, steady as stone. The discipline, the silence, the precision, it had been her purpose. She was respected there, valued for her skill. But here she was, just Naomi Walker, a black woman running a farm too small to matter. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished barrel. She saw the lines of her face, older, more tired, but behind her eyes, the same soldier she once was stared back. She closed the case, heart pounding. "No," she muttered, shaking her head. "That's not who I am anymore." Still, the thought gnawed at her. If she didn't stand up for her land, who would? The sheriff had dismissed her. The neighbors whispered pity but wouldn't help. And the gang, Rex Dalton and his men, were laughing at her weakness in bars right now. She sat back against the barn wall, knees pulled to her chest. For the first time in years, tears fell. She thought of her mother, who had worked double shifts as a nurse to keep the family afloat, who had told Naomi, "Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's getting up every day when the world tells you to stay down." Naomi wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that surviving each day was enough. But the rage inside her, the humiliation of the sheriff's dismissive smirk, the stench of her burning fields, the echo of Rex's cruel laugh, refused to quiet. She felt trapped between two versions of herself, the farmer who wanted peace and the soldier who knew how to fight. Which one was she meant to be now? Meanwhile, in town, Rex was bragging. In the bar, he told anyone who'd listen that Naomi was done. His men laughed, tossing around words meant to strip her humanity, calling her weak, calling her out of place, calling her farm good for nothing but kindling. The arrogance made them blind. They thought they'd broken her. Back at the farmhouse, Naomi stared into the dark. The silence pressed heavy, louder than any battlefield she'd known. She whispered as if to her father, "What if I can't do this? What if I fight back and lose everything anyway?" The doubt weighed on her like chains, but beneath it a flicker of defiance smoldered. She wasn't sure yet how to move forward, but she knew one thing. Running was not in her blood. She stood finally, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Her body was weary, but her spirit, though bruised, refused to die. Alone in that farmhouse, Naomi whispered into the night, "If they come again, they'll see I'm not the woman they think I am." The morning after another sleepless night, Naomi rose to the sound of boots crunching on gravel. Her hand instinctively went to the rifle case in the barn before she caught herself. It was only Caleb Harris, the young neighbor who often stopped by to help with chores in exchange for a hot meal. "Morning, Miss Naomi," he called, his voice warm but edged with worry. He carried a basket of eggs from his family's chickens, setting them on her porch. "I heard what happened." "Folks are talking," Naomi stiffened. She didn't like pity, and she didn't want her pain to be a story for others to pass around. "I don't need gossip, Caleb. I need these fields back the way they were." Caleb's gaze softened. He was barely 20, lanky with calloused hands from working his family's land. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. "You've carried too much alone." Something in his voice disarmed her. Naomi sat down on the porch steps, staring at the horizon. "This land, it's all I have left. And they think they can just come here and burn it like I'm nothing." Caleb hesitated, then sat beside her. "You're not nothing. You're stronger than anyone around here gives you credit for." Naomi wanted to laugh at that. Strong? She had spent the past 2 nights crying, hiding from her neighbors, shrinking under the sheriff's indifference. But Caleb's words lingered. Maybe he saw something in her that she had forgotten. That afternoon, Naomi walked back to the barn. The rifle case seemed to call her. She hesitated before opening it again. Her fingers brushed over the cold steel, then moved to the scope. She lifted it to her eye, steadying her breath as if it were second nature. In the distance, the burned field blurred into focus through the glass. Memories surged. She could almost feel the weight of her uniform, hear the crackle of her headset, the quiet command in her ear. "Walker, take the shot." Her hands trembled at first, then steadied. She set the rifle down and exhaled. "I can't hide from who I am," she murmured. Behind her, a gasp broke the silence. Naomi turned sharply. Caleb stood in the barn doorway, wide-eyed. You were a soldier, he stammered. Naomi's jaw tightened. I was more than that. I was a protector. Caleb stepped closer, awe replacing shock. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because they already see me as dangerous, she replied bitterly. A black woman with a rifle? They'd never see honor. Just fear, Caleb shook his head. They need to see you, Miss Naomi. They need to know you're not someone they can push around. Naomi lowered her gaze. This fight isn't yours, Caleb. You don't need to get caught up in it. But Caleb's eyes hardened. If they come for you, they come for all of us. And I won't stand by. For the first time in days, Naomi felt something stir inside her that wasn't fear. It was solidarity, quiet but steady. Word spread quickly through whispers at the general store. The Iron Vultures were planning another raid. Some said they wanted to finish the job. Others claimed they were looking to make an example out of Naomi. That night, Naomi stood alone in her kitchen, staring at the old family Bible on the table. Her father's handwriting in the margins reminded her of his strength. She whispered, I don't want war, but I won't let them take what's mine. She spent the following day preparing. She walked the land, marking vantage points only she could see. She checked the rifle, cleaned the barrel, practiced with the patience of old days. Each step steadied her. Each movement reminded her she had not forgotten. Caleb returned, carrying tools to mend her fences. When he saw her practicing, he nodded with quiet respect. They won't know what hit them, he said. Naomi gave him a hard look. This isn't about revenge. It's about dignity. I won't let them burn me down, Caleb smiled faintly. Then let me help. I may not have your aim, but I've got hands and a spine. I'll stand with you. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but understand this. You follow my lead. If we fight smart. Together they worked into the night. Caleb set traps near the fences, while Naomi chose her positions carefully. The land that once felt like a burden now became her battlefield, not for war, but for survival. As the sun set, she stood at the edge of her fields, rifle in hand. The soil beneath her boots felt alive, like her parents' voices rising through it. Her whisper carried into the wind. Let them come. They'll learn who I am. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that makes every breath feel louder than it should. The moon hung low over Naomi's farm, casting faint silver streaks across the broken fences and burned crops. But Naomi wasn't afraid anymore. She crouched on the barn's upper loft, her rifle steady in her hands. Her breathing measured, slow in, slow out, like she had done countless times before. From a distance came the low growl of engines. Headlights cut through the darkness, winding down the dirt road like hungry eyes. The Iron Vultures had arrived. Caleb, crouched near the porch with a lantern doused, whispered sharply, They're here. Naomi didn't answer. Her eyes narrowed behind the scope. She counted the trucks, 3, maybe 4, packed with men drunk on arrogance and hate. They piled out, jeering, their boots crunching against her soil. Rex Dalton, the leader, stepped forward. His leather jacket gleamed in the headlights, his grin wide and cruel. Naomi Walker, he shouted. Thought you could ignore us? Tonight we finish this little game. Laughter erupted behind him. One of the men kicked down part of her fence. Another smashed a lantern against the barn door. Flames flickered briefly before sputtering out. They thought destruction was power. Naomi's voice rang out, calm but sharp. You should have stayed in town, the gang froze. The voice was steady, controlled, not the trembling plea they expected. Rex smirked. You finally found your tongue, huh? Come on out, show us that brave face. Naomi exhaled and squeezed the trigger. A single shot cracked through the night. Sparks burst as the bullet shattered the headlight of Rex's truck. The field plunged into near darkness save for the pale glow of the moon. The men stumbled, startled. One cursed loudly, She's armed! Naomi chambered another round, her heartbeat calm, her hands steady. Another shot, and the tire of the second truck exploded, hissing as it sank into the soil. Panic rippled through the gang. What the hell is this? Who shoots like that? From the shadows, Naomi stepped forward. Rifle slung at her side, eyes blazing, her voice unflinching. I was patient because I wanted peace. But don't mistake patience for weakness. You came for my farm because you thought I was defenseless. You forgot I was a soldier, the men shifted uneasily. Rex snarled, trying to mask his fear with fury. You think one rifle will stop us? We've got numbers. Naomi leveled her gaze on him. Numbers don't matter when you're blind in the dark. As if on cue, Caleb yanked a rope hidden by the fence line. 2 barrels rolled free, clattering into the dirt and startling the gang. In the chaos, Naomi fired again, this time aiming clean through another headlight. More darkness. Bullets flew back, clumsy and desperate. But Naomi knew her land. She crouched low, moving from cover to cover, every step calculated. A shot grazed the barn wall. Another sparked against the tractor, but none came close to her. Rex bellowed, "She can't hold out forever." "Get her." Naomi's voice cut through the night. "You've already lost. Look around, your fear is louder than your guns." One of the younger gang members, trembling, muttered, "She's not normal." "Rex, she's trained." His voice cracked with terror. Naomi aimed again, not at him but at the rifle in his hands. One clean shot and the weapon flew from his grip, clattering into the dirt. He bolted, disappearing into the fields. Coward! Rex roared after him, but his own men were shaken now. Whispers spread. Sniper, soldier, ghost. Naomi finally stepped fully into the open, the moonlight falling across her face. Her presence was steady, her figure unshaken. She raised the rifle, aiming squarely at Rex. "You came here to break me. But look at you, you're the ones broken." For the first time, Rex faltered. Sweat rolled down his temple, his smirk twisting into a scowl. He tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. "You wouldn't dare pull that trigger." Naomi's eyes never wavered. "I don't have to kill you to beat you. But make no mistake, I'll defend what's mine." For a moment, time stretched thin, the silence thick with possibility. Rex's bravado crumbled under the weight of her resolve. His men shifted uneasily, their loyalty cracking. Naomi lowered the barrel slightly, then fired one final shot into the dirt inches from Rex's boots. The ground burst and Rex stumbled backward, pale and shaken. "You live tonight," Naomi declared, her voice sharp as steel. "Not because you deserve it, but because I choose dignity over hate." The words rang louder than any gunfire. One by one, the gang retreated, dragging Rex with them. Their engines roared weakly as they fled into the distance, leaving only dust and silence behind. Caleb stepped out from cover, his chest heaving. "You did it," he whispered, awe flooding his voice. Naomi lowered her rifle, staring into the horizon. "No," she said quietly. "We did it. This land, this home, it still stands." She stood tall under the moonlight, a silhouette of defiance and dignity. The legend of Naomi Walker had just been born. The morning after the raid, the farm was quiet again. The soil was scarred, fences broken, and crops trampled. But the air felt different, lighter somehow, as if the land itself had witnessed her stand and chosen to honor it. Naomi sat on her porch, rifle across her lap, the rising sun painting the fields gold. Caleb joined her, still shaken but smiling faintly. "Word's spreading," he said softly. "The town knows what you did. They're not laughing anymore. They're saying, 'You're the one who stood when no one else would.'" Naomi exhaled, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I didn't want this fight," she murmured, "but I wasn't going to let them take what's mine. My parents worked this land with their hands, and I couldn't let hate erase that." By noon, neighbors who had once kept their distance began arriving. Some brought boards to fix fences, others seeds to replant what had been lost. An older woman whispered, "We should have stood with you sooner. Naomi, you showed us what courage looks like." Naomi nodded quietly, not needing their apologies but accepting their presence as a start. Even the sheriff came, his hat in hand, his eyes lowered. He tried to force a smile. "Heard you gave those boys a lesson. Mighty impressive shooting." Naomi didn't look at him. "You had a chance to do your job. You chose silence. Don't come here for credit now." The sheriff swallowed hard, muttering something about official reports before slinking away. His pride shattered. Caleb worked beside Naomi in the fields that week, mending fences and replanting rows. At night, under the stars, he asked her, "Do you regret it? Showing them who you really are?" Naomi leaned back against the porch post, her gaze steady. "For years I tried to live quiet, to be unseen. I thought peace meant silence. But peace without dignity isn't peace at all." Caleb nodded slowly, his respect for her etched in every line of his face. "You gave me something to believe in. People will remember what you did here. News of the raid and Naomi's stand traveled far beyond the small town. Whispers grew into stories, and soon she was known not just as a poor black farmer, but as a woman who defended her home against hate with the precision of a soldier and the strength of her ancestors. Some called her reckless, others called her dangerous, but to those who mattered, to the young, the silenced, the overlooked, she became a symbol. One evening, Naomi walked through her fields alone, the sun dipping below the hills. The crops were damaged, but the soil was still rich. She pressed her hand into the dirt, whispering, "We're still here." She thought of her father's words. "This land is ours because we fought for it. Don't let anyone steal it again." She smiled faintly. "I kept it safe, Daddy, just like you said." As she straightened, Caleb called from the porch, "Supper's ready." "Miss Naomi," she looked back, rifle resting by the door. Her home still standing, her spirit unbroken. The night was calm, the kind of calm she had long prayed for. Naomi Walker had not sought to be a legend. She had only wanted to live in peace. But in facing hatred, she became something larger. A living reminder that silence does not mean surrender. And dignity is worth defending at any cost. She walked toward the house, her shadow stretching long across the soil. Behind her, the land whispered of scars and survival, of struggle and renewal. Ahead, the light of home glowed warm and steady. For the first time in years, Naomi felt at peace, not because the fight was over, but because she had finally chosen to live unshaken. Naomi Walker's story was never meant to be loud. She did not seek the spotlight, nor did she fight for recognition. She only wanted to live her life with dignity, to work the soil her parents had entrusted to her, and to find peace after years of carrying the weight of battles no one else could see. But life does not always grant silence to those who are different. Sometimes it demands that they stand, not just for themselves, but for everyone who has ever been told they were powerless. The iron vultures came believing they would break her. They thought her skin, her gender, and her isolation marked her as weak. They thought hate could trample over years of resilience. But they forgot that true strength is not found in cruelty or numbers. It is built in silence, in endurance, in the steady heart of someone who refuses to surrender. Naomi did not fight for revenge. She fought for dignity, and in doing so, she reminded everyone who witnessed her stand that survival is not just about living through hardship. It is about claiming the right to exist without fear. Her story spread not because of the bullets fired, but because of the message behind them. Silence is not surrender. Patience is not weakness, and dignity cannot be stolen. Her courage gave voice to others who had long stayed quiet, showing them that even the most underestimated person can become a force too strong to erase. For Naomi, the farm remains scarred but alive, a reflection of herself. Each broken fence, each burned crop tells a story of resilience, of what it means to face hate and walk away unshaken. And while she may never call herself a hero, her name became more than her own. It became a legacy whispered in towns, carried in stories, and etched into the soil she defended. In the end, Naomi Walker proved a truth too often forgotten. Real power does not come from fear or force. It comes from the courage to stand when the world demands you kneel. And when the sun set on that quiet farm, it carried with it a promise that her fight for dignity had become a light for others still trapped in the shadows.